So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to a very special episode of Door to Door. I'm Virginia Stanley, Director of Library Marketing at HarperCollins Publishers. I'm here with my colleagues, Chris Connolly and Lainey Mays, and we are thrilled to bring back to you the one and only, the fabulous author and actor, Kate Mulgrew. Welcome back, Kate.
Hello, Virginia. How are you?
I'm
We're
fine.
virtually going door to door, aren't we?
We are.
Everything's a virtual reality now. I'm not adjusting to it as well as some of my compatriots are, I'm afraid. There's a thing called skin hunger. Have you read about it?
No.
Have you guys read about it at YouTube? It's the longing to touch. We so much miss it. And I do miss that. I'm a real hand holder and hair stroker and, kisser and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah. This digital reality is slightly dry.
Yes. Well, and also there's a thing now called Zoom fatigue, which I had not heard of, but makes sense, where you have to work extra hard because you're just seeing parts of the person's body, like, you're not seeing their hands, and you're not I don't know. It's kind of, I don't know.
Well, it's a natural byproduct of pandemic fatigue, which is, when are we going to get out of this? Are we ever going to be the same? And what is this feeling that we're all feeling? It's not really anxiety. It's not really loneliness. It's not even angst. It's a kind of new feeling that we need to try to define. Let's try to define it. Are you feeling that, Virginia?
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah. Yes. And I don't, excuse me, I don't like to think of this as the new norm, because that would be disrespectful to the people who have lost their lives and the people who are desperately trying to save those lives, our lives.
Oh, I don't think it's the new norm. I'm not suggesting that. I think we're better than that. We're stronger. We're more robust. We're certainly more vital. We long to I think, restore the world to its sense of vitality and wholeness. But for this moment, it is very interesting to observe it, certainly in myself. I think if I weren't working on a novel right now, it might almost slip into a kind of strange melancholy, of which I am very fond, as you know, that fellow Irish woman that you are. Do enjoy our bouts of melancholia, but not like this, within the constraints of a pernicious virus, right?
I know. Yes. Yes to all of that. I know. If we want to be melancholy, we want to be melancholy on our own terms, damn it.
Well, we want to be melancholy, strolling arm in arm down some, wooded field in Ireland.
Yes.
Sipping a whiskey and looking at the beautiful ocean. But this is so strangely chilly in its isolating, in what it does in terms of isolation, because I can't get to you. I can see you all, and I know you're reacting, but are you really? Could be a dream. Yeah. Oh, well, we don't have to go there, do we?
I don't know. We could. Where else are we going?
We certainly could.
Well, in that vein.
Yes.
Whatever that vein is, Kate. Let's talk about, I want to talk about your book.
Okay. Yeah, I do.
Okay. So.
And books, period, I want to talk about.
Books, period. Yeah. Saviors, right?
The joy of life. Great joy of life. My mother was right about that.
Your mother.
Yeah.
Your mother taking those satchels full of books from the library.
Well, I think if you go to anybody and ask any voracious reader how it started, 9 out of 10 of them will point to a parent, mostly, more often than not, the mother. And it wasn't my mother trying to get rid of me. It was my mother trying to guide me toward a happiness that she knew would sustain me for the rest of my life. And oh, how right she was. I think by the time I was 18, I was in the habit of carrying a book in my bag, reading it at every possible opportunity. And in New York, and for New Yorkers, as you know, it's a way of life. Take the subway any time of the day or night. Nothing but row after row of people with their nose in a book. It's wonderful to see.
How old were you? Do you remember, like, what's your earliest memory of, I don't know, going to the library or just having a book in your hand? Do you remember?
I remember my mother taking me to the library with her, and what a great treat it was, because as you know, I was one of 500 children. I was one of 8 children. And to be elected to accompany her alone was very unusual and usually involved some kind of edible treat as well. But she would take her burlap bag, which she got from the farmer down the road. That's what he carried, put his grain in, and he'd bring his beautiful, cleaned out grain bags to my mother, and she used them as library bags. And it would be an empty little nothing. You could fold it into the size of an envelope. By the time we left the Dubuque library, it was full of books. She could have lived there. I mean, it was just sort of, she would lose herself in the stacks. She knew the woman at the front desk. They had a sort of cryptic, ongoing dialogue that I didn't understand at the time, but I was entranced by it. I was enchanted. I knew they were talking about books. It's entirely out of my league, like champagne, like caviar. And mother started me very slowly. I would guess 6 or 7. What could it have been? Anne of Green Gables. Very early on, I was reading Jane Austen and the Brontes, all of them. I went to Colette early too. She wanted that. She was a big proponent of the biography. She did a lot of that. And what she couldn't stand was trash. And she caught me with a book that was trash once. I had a best friend who was a very, very dangerous little chick. She was a diabolical little Irish girl. And she was always getting me in trouble. I mean, if I was one of 500 children, she was one of 10 million. I mean, I never even learned all the names of her brothers and sisters, let alone her parents. I was, who never said a word. They were so dumbfounded with exhaustion. But she said, I've got a good book for you. And it was this tattered blue book about sex. Of course, I was absolutely riveted. What was I, 11 or 12? Riveted. I mean, I hadn't read anything like it in my life. Men and women, women and women, boys and girls, trees and dogs. Everybody was having sex, right? I was just, my heart was racing. This was an Irish Catholic household. No, the flames of hell, eternal, right? She came in one day and she said, Katie Mulgrew, what are you doing? What are you hiding under the covers? Let me have it. I gave it to her. She just looked at it. She said, you come with me down the stairs into the living room. She lit a fire and she said, this will ruin your good mind. And that's exactly what they're trying to do. It's trash. She threw it in the garbage. If I ever catch you with this kind of garbage again, I'm no longer going to discuss anything with you about literature because you don't deserve it. And that was enough to teach me. After that, I got all the sex I needed in my imagination. Pretty much where, no, that's not true. I was just going to say a lie. So that was that. That was the one and only time she caught me red-handed with.
That's interesting. That stuck with you.
Really stuck with me because the same day, I think, in an effort to I don't know, to get back into her good graces, I just said, well, what do you think? She said, you must read books that are going to take you where you otherwise have not been. You must learn to go deeper, and that it will be hard sometimes. There is a discipline to good reading. I want you to start. She said, you just have to really. So she gave me that when we went down to the library, that I remember I was 12 then. It was The Life of Catherine the Great, The Life of Simone Weil, of all things. I guess she thought would somehow I would grasp that. And The Life of Eleonora Duse. And she said, read these 3 and start to think about what kind of a life you would like to have. Yeah.
That's a great teacher.
She was. Well, when it came to books, she was. But she was, in many ways, as you know, I've told you, a very, very unconventional mother.
I love her. I know. She's
Yeah.
just, let's, let's, let's go in. Let's go there, Kate. How to Forget.
Yeah.
A year ago, I had the very high honor of sitting down and talking to you about your hardcover at the time that was about to go on sale, How to Forget, A Daughter's Memoir, which has stayed with me since the first moment I read the first page. And now here we are. It's a year later. Today is the on sale date for the paperback edition of How to Forget. This is a story, your parents' story about your mother. First half of the book is dedicated to your father's life. The second half is dedicated to your mother's life.
Mhm.
And in the past year, I have spoken to so many people who have read this book and come back with this sort of universal feeling of um, identification, identifying with um, what goes into the complexities of caring for a parent or someone who is, an elder, um, not necessarily a parent, but still same sort of role.
Of course.
And it's astounding to me, really, that the message in this book, the themes that are in this book. I have an elderly mother who requires care, and I, I, while none of us are celebrities, we're not actors, we're not, but there's this common denominator here, Kate, a daughter's story. And I think it's incredibly important that this book be read wide and far. And I know that it has. I have quotes after quotes after quotes of people who have read this book and love this book.
No.
And there, I can't say enough about it.
Well, then go on.
Okay, I will.
I think it's lovely. Thank you. Thank
The
you.
Washington Post said that this is one of 20 books to read this summer. That was last year. Here are a few quotes because they just need to be read quick. So here we go. Washington Post. A notable work of nonfiction for 2019. Mulgrew, an actress best known for Star Trek, Voyager, and Orange is the New Black, plays her best role, herself. This is no Hollywood tell-all, but a moving personal story about her family, in particular her aging parents, whom she cared for as they faced terminal illnesses. Love this one by Augustine Burroughs, author of Running with Scissors and Toil and Trouble. The soulmate to Frank McCourt's Angela's Ashes. How to Forget, despite the promise of its title, cannot be forgotten or ignored. And speaking of the McCourts, who we love, Malachi McCourt. Kate Mulgrew is a brilliant actor, which does not conceal her brilliance with the pen. This memoir, How to Forget, plunges you into familial depths of death, disease, and despair, only to pull you up again with a bawdy laugh. Death, disease, and despair are not walls for Mulgrew, but they are steps towards the sunlight of serenity. Read and cry, read and laugh, read and remember How to Forget.
Wow. From a McCourt and a Burroughs, I'm speechless with joy. I mean, how lovely. They're both friends, but still absolutely superb.
Yes.
Well, I think that the commonality here is one of the tedium of grief. I think Americans in particular tend to sentimentalize grief. We're a young country. When you think of it, we're a juvenile country. So we try to always look on the bright side. We're on the bright side of life. We're on the bright side of death. Everything's a Hallmark card. It's not. Death, especially when it's protracted, as it was in my mother's case with Alzheimer's, is agonizingly tedious. The heartbreak is so extended that by the time the person actually dies, you're drained. There's a sense of terrible depletion. In our eagerness, I think, to do the right thing by the one who herself gave us life, we tend, when we talk about the death of our mother by Alzheimer's, to concentrate on, what an extraordinary creature she was when she was vital. I concentrated a lot on what she was when she wasn't. And that's because the last 9 years of her life are the most vivid. Her loss of self is excruciatingly and exquisitely vivid to me. To watch your own mother, the very woman, all 5'5" of her and 100 pounds, who first taught you how to fall in love with literature, become an absolute, a fossil, a nothing, an absolute blank. To me, was just kind of, I thought this lends an entirely new meaning to grief. Usually when we talk about grief, we get to talk about, oh, somebody shot him, or he had cancer, and he was there, he had his wits about him, and and everybody gets to cry. But you don't cry over a 9-year period.
Right.
You just lose yourself.
Yeah.
And you watch your mother completely disappear.
Yeah.
All the while thinking she's still there. So it's harrowing on top of being so desperately sad. It's harrowing because you can't help but think, oh, she is there. Oh, she is. She's just lost in that thicket. And if I can just find the way, I will search for the beacon. And I, unlike all of the great scientists in the world, I, Kate Mulgrew, will come up with it. Well, of course you don't. You just watch those eyes as they glaze over, as they then sort of calcify into pockets of absolute vacancy. And then you get to bury her. And then you get to look around and wonder who the hell you are.
Mm-hmm.
In the book, I tried to share what that felt like. Dad's death was so much easier and so typical of the father, isn't it? So typical of the charismatic, charming, handsome, funny, witty dad to die within 3 weeks because he willed it so, right? The doctor said, you've got such and such amount of time. That's it, I'm out. And he was summarily out.
Yeah.
With every one of his loved ones gathered around that bed. His children, his grandchildren, his great-grandchildren, and his wife, who was brought in as the last one. Mother, that's your husband now. You want to say goodbye to him? And she looked at him, and then she put her fingers on his forehead, and tapped them, and went, adios, el señor. Because her caretaker was Mexican, and that's all she could really recall. So those were my mother's last words to the man with whom she'd shared 8 children, the deaths of 2 of those children, and 55 years of marriage. Tough, really tough.
I was looking back at the interview that we had done, last year, and you talked about this. You actually said it was the hardest part of writing the book, when you brought your mother in to say goodbye to him. And after, as you just said, after all of that journey that they went on together, that they got together. Love the story of how they got together, but that they got together, and then they have all these kids, they have their highs and their lows, and they're very different in many ways, but then there's no wrap up.
But also, and women out there, especially daughters out there, will get me when I say she was still mobile. There was a thread of cognitive awareness very slight thread still running somewhere through her brain as she sat and looked at him, because I could see the perplexity. I could see the crease in her forehead. She could feel in the ambience of the room that there was an expectation upon her to deliver something regarding this man. She wanted to please, but she could not find him. And so she thought it would be kind of a joke.
I know. Kate, can you read that part of the book where you go, when you go back home, you're performing in your one woman show about Katharine Hepburn, and then you're called home. Can you read the part where you talk about seeing your mother? I just thought that part was very tender and also very universal.
Where I talk about seeing my mother, or
when you go up to her where she's lying in bed, and you see her and you think that, well, I don't want to give it away, but I mean you're approaching her, and
oh yes, I'll have to look for that. I don't even know where that is. I marked the chapter with my father.
Okay, well, that's such a powerful part too, the part with your dad.
Yeah. I'll look for that. If you can think of it, great. Yeah, I was pulled off the road because of my father. My brother said, you better get home. Something's up with Dad, and it's serious. So I went, and I was there. Directly off the plane, I went to the clinic where my father, I saw, was being measured for radiation. And I said to my brother, Joe, what are you doing? Does Dad understand the ramifications of this? Does Dad understand everything, Joe? Well, just take it easy, Kate. You know, one step at a time. We're going to do the radiation. I said, has Dad been told by the doctor exactly what is going on? Well, in so many words, I said, in other words, he has not clearly and definitively been spoken to like the adult that he is. This is not the time to start, playing games with our father, who would not have it any other way. So if he thinks he's being, measured back there for the headaches he's getting, some pill, this needs to be clarified. So we went into the room. My brother only did that out of great love for our father. Each child reacts very differently, but I insisted that Dad be told. And we gathered in the room with the doctor, Dr. Keurig, and the doctor told my father that he had systemic cancer. Lung primary. It traveled up his brainstem and formed into a now quite a large tumor, which was inoperable. And it was coming into his brain, and it was everywhere. And that he, in fact, had a very limited time to live. So we stood there in the room, and in the room, it was very quiet. Dr. Koenig, for the first time in his conversation with my father, looked away. Suddenly, I had an image of Dr. Koenig returning to his home at night after a day's work, after hours of testing and probing, after making onerous decisions that invariably turned into hours of uncertainty, and these hours in turn eclipsed by hopelessness and finally despair. How, I wondered, had he learned to battle chronic exhaustion with such forbearance? If we follow the radiation with a rigorous course of chemo, I think you will probably have a few weeks more, at the most a couple of months. There will be questionable quality of life because you will be feeling the effects of the toxins from the chemo, but you will have more time. The silence, intensely felt, remained unbroken. All eyes were on my father, whose own thoughts appeared to have turned inward. He shook his head ever so slightly, as if to clear it, looked out the window at the gray winter's day, looked down at his feet as if verifying their existence. then slowly raised his eyes to meet the doctor's and said, "Not a lot of laughs in your line of work, are there, pal?" Dr. Koenig, clearly startled, did not know how to respond. Joe and I chuckled in a show of solidarity more than anything else, and because responding to our father's humor, however unexpected, was in our DNA. My father rose to his feet. "Kitten?" he asked, looking at me for the first time since entering the room. "Get my coat, will you? Time to go home." He then extended his hand to the doctor, formally and with intention, and the doctor received it with equal gravitas. They stood there for a moment, looking at each other, and I silently prayed that Dr. Koenig would say nothing more. He didn't, whereupon my father said, "I want to thank you for all you've done. I have no doubt you are an excellent doctor, but you and I will not be meeting again." Dr. Koenig ushered us into the corridor and watched as we walked the length of the oncology unit, past the nurse's desk where Sam waved happily from her station, and through the revolving doors into the bleak afternoon light. The three of us stood in the parking lot for a moment before making our way slowly to Joe's car. When we reached it, I opened the door for my father, and as he settled into the passenger seat, I leaned into him. "What do you say to a drink, Dad?" I asked, my hand on the sleeve of his down jacket. "I'd say, now you're talking my lingo," my father replied, as Joe pulled out of the parking lot and we started home. Yeah.
I that scene is so powerful. One, because you cut straight through the BS and talked to your father, got him the information that he needed. Because right before that, you talk about how like you sort of walk in and you see and you can't quite believe that he is allowing, they're putting these marks on us, they're going to do this radiation, and you're thinking, he doesn't know what's going on. And this isn't like him. He's the person who always knows what's going on, and he deserves to be told.
Right. But this was controversial, Virginia, and I think it is in most families where there are several siblings. My brother Joe, out of love, I think would have allowed my father to have gone to his grave. Hopeful, maybe. Certainly not knowing the extent of the cancer. But I thought that we should honor my father's character, which had always been straight shooting and straight up, and one of the things I respected most about him. So even though he may have been allowed himself to be measured for radiation, even though I'm sure at the back of his very smart mind, he was not without his own suspicions, I think in the end, it was the right and only thing to do. And then, of course, what happened was a very fast and merciful death. And that is what we wish for all of our parents, don't we?
Yes, we do.
I couldn't deliver in my mother's case, although she asked me to assist her in so doing. Would I get the pills? She asked me. She said, "I've read about it, and there is a cocktail of pills available if you have the right contacts," which I think you do, Kitten. "So why don't you go back to Los Angeles and get the pills and bring them back to me? And all you'll have to do is just make sure they go down. I won't ask you to do anything else." But when I got to the doctor in Los Angeles, who said, "Yes, I can get you that cocktail of pills, but I don't think you're going to need it." I said, "Why?" And she said, "Because by the time you see your mother again, which would be 2 weeks hence, she will have forgotten." And she had. It was never raised again.
That's a touchy one.
Well, it's a very touchy one, because could I have done it anyway?
Right.
I mean, highly doubt that I would have been able to see that one through. But I did go to my friend, the doctor, and ask her, "Is such a cocktail available? What is done?" I mean, only a few states in the nation, maybe only one, have assisted euthanasia, don't they?
Right. I think so. But
Yeah.
what's tricky about that too is that from that one conversation with you and your mother, she wanted you to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward, she didn't even remember asking you.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So
But she didn't remember asking me that.
yeah.
But I think, and I again refer to it as the thicket, I think that she was, she pled for some time with me until language was no longer serviceable. And then we, couldn't talk about it anymore. I think
Right.
she very, very much wanted to go out before it eclipsed everything, but I couldn't do it. I
Yeah.
just couldn't do it.
No, I understand completely. I so I as I say to you, and to anyone who I hand this book to, Chris Laney and I have been talking about this book, and will continue to, because does have this universal theme: caretaking, siblings, very complex, as you say. But there's also, and I don't want people to walk away thinking that this is devoid of humor, because there's lots of humor throughout this book, as of course a big old Irish clan such as yours.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, and it's
A lot of irreverence, a lot of screaming laughter, a lot of hysterical laughter.
yeah,
Not the least of which happened in her Alzheimer's, in the session with the doctor when he told her she had Alzheimer's, because she had written notes on the inside of her hand.
oh, that's right, yeah.
And on the on the test, the questions are, Mrs. Mulgrew, can you tell me who the President of the United States is? Who cares? And Mrs. Mulgrew, can you tell us what year it is? She opens her hand. Mrs. Mulgrew, are you cheating on your Alzheimer's test? And of course she had been.
I love that.
We laughed in the room, we laughed.
What are you going to do? You're going to laugh. You have to laugh. And sometimes you have to laugh because you can only cry so much. And it's funny that she would think to make herself some crib notes to get through the neurologist's
Yeah.
test.
Yeah, I wondered about that later. Do you know, what was that real intention? Was she trying to pass it with flying colors? Was she trying to escape this blow? Because when I told her I was taking her in for the test, she acquiesced immediately. She told me she thought she'd had a series of strokes. She thought there had been an electrical current had gone through her brain, she said. So I thought, that sounds like Lewy body. But she wanted the exam and she got it. And he diagnosed her on the spot.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, Kate, last year when we talked, you had so much to say, and in your usual way, so eloquent, that we took some snippets of things that you had said. And I'd love to play a few of those right now, if you wouldn't mind.
Of course.
Christopher, would you play the clip on laughing, please?
Happy to.
Thank you. This is from the interview, not from the book on tape, which is different.
Right.
Let me try this again.
We were a family that knew how to laugh through it all. That's what you did. Through grief, through pain, through sadness, teasing and laughing, wild laughter. Mm-hmm. When you laugh through a broken heart, it's very different than laughing freely.
Yeah.
Just such moments in this book, throughout this book. I wish I had my galley, which is underlined and tagged and flagged, because it is poetic.
I'm looking for that one passage with my mother, but
I can tell you where it is.
Where is it?
It's when you're talking about the great living room. I'll be right back.
Where is she going? Huh?
Here I am. I'm right here.
All right.
Now, because
Well, I don't think it matters. That's just, when I saw her after coming home with Lucy, I think that's what you're talking.
that's exactly it. And
Yeah,
when-
but I
yes.
don't know where it is. I haven't a clue now.
Okay. I'm sorry. It's just that it's just so beautiful because you think that the point of that section is that you think that you will be the one that she will recognize, that there's something that you can do,
Yes,
something that you can say. And
yes,
it's heartbreaking because I'm sure everybody feels that way because you're seeing this person who you've known your entire life, and yet now there's no glint.
that's right.
And I was just blown away by that. You know what? That's fine because it gives people a reason to
Find it and read it. Yeah, yeah.
heaven.
But it also brings her back to me.
I know.
It needed to be written, that book, Virginia, in a way that Born with Teeth, my first memoir, probably didn't. Born with Teeth was my way of jumping off the high dive and seeing if I could even scribble a sentence. But How to Forget was born out of a real sense of need and an intense feeling of loneliness. I went away to Ireland to write it, and I was quite isolated there. The winters in Ireland are, as I'm sure you know, exceptionally bleak, even in their austerity and their beauty. It rains every day. It's dark most of the day. It lends itself beautifully to the discipline of writing, but it was excruciating. And I couldn't wait till 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock when I could light the fires, 6 o'clock when I could have a whiskey or a glass of wine. And then the tears would just come because the evocation of them, the pulling them up again was just startling in its vividness and in its demands. You think, oh, I'm of a certain age. How old was I when I wrote that book? 62, 63. This will be all right. I'll understand this from, the vantage point of age and maturity, depth and wisdom. But you don't get a mulligan at any point. In fact, with age, these feelings and these insights and this love has an altogether more authentic rawness than it ever did when I was young, and cloaked it in sentimentality and cloaked it in the mythology of the family. Now they were dead, and I could look at it quite starkly. And when you measure your love against that loneliness, you know where you stood with those people. And I really, really loved my mother. I loved my father, but it was of a different value and of a different dimension. And I found that out too while I wrote it. So beware. And that's why I got into lots of stuff with some of my siblings, because beware. If you're going to walk this plank, that, not everybody's going to like it.
Yeah. And, when I was looking again at the interview that we had done, and you talked about the loneliness, that you were determined to write the truth, that you wanted to know who they were, and what did you really want to say about them? What did you want us to know about these two people? Why do I care about these two people? I care about them now. After having read your book, I care very much about those people, and I didn't know them. So hats off to you, Ms. Mulgrew, for doing
Thank you for that.
because
But I think that most children out there who have lost their parents, or are in the process of saying goodbye to their parents, are fully aware that they have not yet come face to face with the truth of their feelings for their parents. We only really come to adore them through their eccentricities, through their frailties, through their odd and strangely, charming behaviors, and sometimes through the darkness as well. And I think what I managed to convey somehow was who they really, really were.
Yeah, you did. You did. And they're so different. And yet I don't I can't explain it. But she was an amazing person, this great reader, this great lover of the arts, an artist,
Great painter.
great
Mhm.
painter. Yeah. And your dad was a complicated man, and
Mhm.
how these two got together, how did that happen? They're so different, they come from different backgrounds. I mean, she was, you know hanging out with the Kennedys, I mean, this was a really wild story. And you kids running around in Derby Grange, this massive place in Dubuque.
Like feral animals. That's how
Yeah.
we were running
Well, it
around.
sounded like a lot of fun, to tell you the truth.
It was pretty free. It was pretty
Yeah.
free.
Yeah, I mean, when
Not
you
a lot
say,
of rules.
we didn't have breakfast. She was,
No breakfast, no food, very little food. And the only rule was do not be boring, do not be average. Once she did this, you knew you were dead.
oh my God, she, she's the best. She's just wonderful and funny and witty and smart and deep. And you are the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Let's put it that way.
That's very sweet.
I have another quote that I want to read to you. This is from
Okay.
Maxine Bleiweiss, who was a longtime public library director in Connecticut. Now she's got her own consulting firm.
Mm-hmm.
She told me when this book first came out, this is a incredibly well read and just such one of the smartest people I've ever met. And she absolutely adores your book. So I'm going to read this. How to Forget leaves you wishing you had read it before going through the hardest role of an adult child, being witness to your parents at the end of their lives. Whether the reason is cancer, Alzheimer's, or natural causes, this book by Kate Mulgrew left me wishing I had read this book before going through the challenge of how to be the best daughter for my parents' last months. Mulgrew's insight will stay with me for a long, long time and be on my recommendation list for all who are saying goodbye to their parents.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah. But she doesn't say, you see, she doesn't say, which I love, thank you, Jesus. She doesn't say, Mulgrew's, she used my insight. She didn't say the way I did it, because I didn't do it in an exemplary fashion. I just bore witness to their deaths in a way that I felt was as honest as I could be. And the hardest part was trying to recover all those years, the slow process of deterioration, which is a hell of a thing to have to write, because you have to, there's a trajectory. There's a dance there that I had to be very specific about. And I'll tell you, sometimes I'd go to the end of the day and I'd get to a memory and I'd realize that I had to go back, that I skipped actually a vital period. And the very thought of having to uncover that would so disturb me that I just sit in front of that roaring fire in Ireland with the rain outside and just stop. Do you know? How am I going to do that and then that? But I did it. And it was not cathartic, Virginia. So sing it out.
Yeah.
No way is this kind of a book cathartic. To the contrary, it may have helped me in terms of my own self-examination, but in terms of feeling good about it,
No.
You don't.
No, I understand what you're saying.
Right.
I do.
You've gone deeper. Do you know?
Well, Kate, it's a brave thing you did. I mean, no shortcuts. Chris, would you play another clip, please? Would you play the one on forgiveness?
But it's not until we get older that we get it, that everybody should be forgiven, that we're all guilty of the same thing, which is being little and small and narrow within a very limited time frame, ladies and gentlemen. So the sooner you can get to forgiveness, the better.
I love these. There's one more. Let's play it and let's do questions. Is that okay, Kate?
I'd love that.
Okay. Parents, Chris, please.
How your parents love you and treat you, how they raise you and define you, has everything to do with how you choose who you're going to love, how you're going to love them, I think.
There are just these moments in that interview, and anybody can go back and watch it, that are just, they're just these I don't know, they're just these gold crystalline pieces of, I don't know, perspective, you know,
You
that
have to have the interviewer to draw it out of you. And you and I are like-minded, Virginia. We are. We have the same sense of pity, and your sympathy is very clear to me. So I respond to it with everything.
well, you're very kind to say that. I take that as a compliment, a huge compliment, Kate. Thank you. I could talk to you for forever.
Yeah, so could I.
Let's do questions.
Yeah,
Chris, are you good with that, Kate?
I'm happy to. Yeah.
Okay. Chris, Lainey?
Well, first of all, Kate, I just want to say there's an outpouring of appreciation for people who struggled to put into words their experiences that are similar to yours. But again, I think there's that confusion and just that inability to really, again, vocalize or communicate the experience. So I am curious, what's that like? Once the book's out in the world and people do come to you and have that appreciation for bearing your soul and then kind of seeing their experience through you?
Well, I think you can understand that it's deeply gratifying on many levels. And let's not distort the truth here, which is that I had longed all my life to write a book and see it published, and that this would be received as well as it was so deeply satisfying to me. On the other hand, there was controversy within my own family about the verisimilitude of the book, and that causes a lot of conflict. So again, I would have to say, if anyone out there is thinking of writing a memoir, make it very clear to your loved ones that a memoir is your point of view, your memory. That is the beauty of the memoir, and also the difficulty of the memoir.
A lot of love for the readings and the quotes that we saw, and people that heard the interview before talked about it, people even saying, like, you answered their question before and they still think about it, they meant so much to them. Here's an easily answered question. They want to know if you read the audio for the audiobook.
If I did it,
Mm-hmm.
I did. Of course I did it. It was
Yeah,
the first part of the deal. I've been doing audiobooks all my life, so the publisher wanted that right away, and I agreed happily. And I understand that it's had a pretty robust success, the audiobook, because obviously I'm writing about things that are of great significance to me, and my voice bears that out. So when you get that, often when you are listening to an audiobook and you're listening to a very good voice, a professional actor reading it, you can be mesmerized by the excellence of the voice, by the discipline, by the quality. But I think, we all know the difference between a book that's being read by someone who's being paid a great deal to read it beautifully, and one who's written the book and is trying very hard to say these words so that she can, let them go without completely falling apart again. So that restraint, I think, is clear in my audio version. Restraint in the world of an actor is another word for holding on hard and fast.
I will say that audio is Well, because it has your emotional voice and your physical voice, and those married together deliver such an emotional punch. We have that link up there, or Chris, is it up there along with all the different formats to the book? You can get the book in e-format, the physical paperback, and the audio, which is just, it's so good. It's like you just said, Kate. I mean, these are your words, and no one else really could have read them as emotionally, as effectively, I think.
Yeah, it's a challenge. And I knew that this one would be particularly tough. Much harder. Yeah, no, it was hard. I had to stop a lot, but I did. And that's the other thing. You have to know that when you're writing the book, you're saying to the world, I'm giving this to you now.
Yeah.
And I got to honor that deal. I don't buy it when people try to backpedal, and I don't know, once you agree to doing the audiobook, you agree to doing the video, you agree to this, you then have to honor all of that. I wrote this so that it would be consumed. And that was my wish. There have been, as I said, a little bit of difficulty with the family, but nothing that I didn't fully expect. I think when you venture forth into a foreign place that has at its center a deep pool of familiarity, you're going to have to cross a minefield to get there. That's all there is to it.
No regrets.
No regrets.
Good.
Absolutely not. No.
Good. It's your life.
Right. That's right.
Damn it.
The way Virginia said that, you guys, that's right. Yes.
Chris, Laney, who else is out there asking questions?
Who has a question?
Yeah. So Sandra Hoffman said, question, does the current situation influence the way you write? And then some people are asking what you're working on now.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I'm thinking about it all the time, meaning the pandemic. I am working on a novel, and the pandemic is affecting the way I am writing the novel. But first, let me say that the novel is something that's also surprising me every single day. I started out on one pony, and although I'm still on the same pony, I've had to let go of reins, I've had to let go of the saddle, I've had to let go of the bridle. I mean, I'm just hanging on to this wild pony that takes me in its own direction. But the pandemic, the loneliness, the dark feelings, the shadows, they find their way in. And this is a story about a young woman, a 23-year-old woman, who is trying to find her own vulnerability and having a lot of trouble getting there. But I won't say any more. I'm just surprised at where it seems to be taking me. And Virginia, do you agree that sometimes, have you heard this from writers? I mean, I had it all sort of outlined and everything, and then I sat down to write, and the pandemic was upon us, and it just went there.
I think it's affected everybody in such strange ways, and I think that you're smart to follow your heart, that if the other one wasn't working for you, do you know how many times people have said, I've tried it, put it in a drawer, start again? And who knows what influences that? Who knows what strikes the heart? But certainly this time is nothing we've ever known before. And so I say to you, hang on to it.
I think that sort of like acting, you have to use it. You have to use it, and use it to your advantage if you can. It's not my fault there's a pandemic. I had determined to write this novel well before that, but here it is. It's much, much bigger than this teeny tiny, absolutely insignificant book. But if I let it somehow help me shape the book, I think I will have done something. I think I will have allowed the pandemic to help rather than hurt me.
Good. That's, I think that if any of us can find anything positive to work from, that's a good, going back to something you said before, we discussed this, The idea of isolation at this time, and the parallels that can be drawn between what was happening when you were caring for your parents, the isolation that you felt, and the isolation that so many people feel today, caring for others who, you've got the social distance, but yet there are lots of different situations out there, and people are isolated in a way that they never were before. And I don't know, I just wanted to know if you wanted to talk about that for a second.
Well, I think this is where the Alzheimer's organization and my knowledge and familiarity with Alzheimer's comes in. I don't think it's so much isolation, although that is a good word, in many ways a splendid word. But I think when particularly oldest daughters complain of isolation and the burden of caregiving, caretaking, it's often put upon the oldest daughter. I don't know if she volunteers or if it's just assumed or if she does it. What she means is not the burden of feeding her parent, bathing her parent, lifting her parent, combing her parent's hair, seeing her parent lose all of her or his cognitive value. It is that the other siblings cease to come by. They don't come around much anymore. I've studied this. The caregiver is left to her or his own devices with the one who is losing his or her life. It seems to be a herd thing. It seems to be very human to want to back away from that. So what I advocate and what the Alzheimer's organization advocates and promotes is seek out your local chapter. There is one everywhere. You may be in a rural community, and even then go to your nearest larger town and you will find a chapter, and they will help you understand that you can do it physically alone. There's a good nurse in a lot of us women, do you know? We're built for it, but we're not built to bear the harrowing, I go back to that word, nature of the thing alone, without anyone to show us sympathy. Instead, it is all directed at the one who no longer understands what sympathy is. So the burden has to be shared emotionally, whatever that means. Come and sit with the person who's doing it for 3 hours. You don't have to do anything. Make her laugh, talk, tell a story, stroke her hair. It's just being there and understanding that that is a dark valley, and she can't, nor should she be expected to go through that alone, carrying her dying mother on her back. Not right.
No.
We're selfish and we're frightened in the face of death, Virginia. Mortality is so frightening to all of us. Maybe not to these kids because they're very young, but it's very, very frightening when you're burying a parent, because you're absolutely struck by the fact that you're next. This was your link to who you were.
That's right.
Your youth, everything about you that promised endurance is now going through your fingers like sand. So you've got to be helped, picked up through that.
Yeah.
Crucial.
Yeah. It's great advice, and it's important. It's important to remind people that it does take a village, and if you can, you should. I don't want us to ever stop talking.
I don't either.
Okay, let's keep going. I do want to mention your virtual cocktail hours, Kate.
Yes, but that's a funny thing that I came up with for the pandemic.
Do tell.
On Thursday night from 6 to 7, I hold a cocktail hour on Zoom. I just wanted to find a way to reach out to people, utter strangers in the world going through the pandemic, people who I ordinarily or otherwise would never know. And I asked my social media director to help me, Amy Imhoff. And I think that in the first 2 or 3 days, there were 1,500 submissions. I asked them to write 3 or 4 sentences explaining to me what the pandemic has meant to them, how it's shaped to them, how it's defined them. And out of those people, I choose 6 to talk with for an hour on Thursday night. And we talk about anything and everything. We talk about love. We often talk about loneliness. I choose people from all walks of life. I had a little girl on last week. I think she was 12. I had a first responder. I had a politician. I mean, it's wonderful to listen to them. I had a blind man, father of 3, in New Zealand, talking to me about what it was like. And you reach across the globe to each other for an hour, and something wonderful happens. That was my intention, and that's it. And so that's my way of just saying we're all in this together.
Wow, that is lovely. So we
will join. I'm sending you an invitation. Okay.
Yay.
All right.
I love that. Chris, Lainey, are there any other questions or things that we need to ask Kate? People out there watching, listening, loving Ms. Mulgrew?
Again, an outpouring of appreciation. There was a question about siblings, and I know you talked about them briefly, Kate. Your relationship with your siblings, how has that changed before or after with the book coming out? Has it been fractured? Has it gotten better?
I think I mentioned, it was difficult with one of my brothers, very. And I think that's just the way it has to be. I went to him and I appealed to him, and I was always very straight with him. But I'm not him. And my memories are not his memories. And I don't believe that we should hold other people hostage for their own memories and feelings. We shouldn't punish them for it. I love him. I get it. He's a deeply private person. And here I am writing books about mother and dad. But as I said to you, Virginia, that's just part of the deal, isn't it?
That is part of the deal. It's
Anne Royfey told me that, she's my great friend. Do you know the writer Anne Royfey?
Oh, sure. Of course.
She said, listen, kid, if you're going to write memoir, you got to get tough, because your siblings will react. They will react. I don't think you can ever be prepared for quite how they're going to react. But that's fine. That's the way it is.
You said you were at peace when you were done with this book, and you said you were happy. You were happy. You did what you needed to do.
I did. And I've had no regrets about that.
Good.
I've had no change of mind or heart about it.
Good.
What's disturbing is that you can't know that you're going to, affect someone else that you love very much by telling your own story. But so be it. Otherwise, we would have no books, right?
That's right.
We would have no biography of any kind.
No.
You have to do that. Honesty is the key.
Well, I feel that this book is so honest. It's so transparent, and as I said, very brave. You really went there with this book, and I guess I'll just say again that for the 3 people out there who are not followers of Kate Mulgrew's theatrical work, who are you? A, but B, you don't need to be. That's the whole point. You don't need to be. What you need to do is read this book and fall deep into the lives of these 2 people who are the parents of Kate Mulgrew. She has magically, beautifully written these 2 profiles of these people, who they were. We didn't even get into your grandparents, and I love learning about your grandparents. Why do I care? I don't know. All I know is that I do. And everybody who has read this book feels the same way, because you have fleshed out these 2 people who are responsible for you, and who weathered storms, and who had endings that came too soon and unfairly, and life is not fair. But you were a wonderful daughter, and the stories that you tell about your journeys with your mother, the fun that you had, the gifts that you gave her, the gift of travel. Come with me. I will fund this trip. Come and explore, because that was in her. You're so much like her.
Yeah.
And your dad, and just navigating that, proudly, not proudly, I don't know, but didn't see you perform. Said, oh, you're, and you love him in
Yeah.
spite of that.
I do. I did. I
Yes.
do. Right.
It's just absolutely wonderful, and God knows they love you. It's clear throughout
Well,
that book.
Then I guess I accomplished what I was hoping I could accomplish. But you have been terrific, Virginia, and I want to thank you particularly for, not only promoting this book, but I think that you really, really like it very much, and that matters deeply to me. And so I just hope that, by having this interview with the world, other people will think to pick it up.
I hope that they do.
That would
because
make me
it was
quite happy.
Not anything that they will, despite the title, they won't forget them. They won't forget you. You're unforgettable. I think that we should raise a glass.
Okay, here we go. Everybody, what do we say, Virginia?
We say Shlanta.
Sláinte, everybody.
Kate Mulgrew,
Thank you.
thank you so much.
Thank you, Virginia.
To
You're the
Tom
best.
and Joan, to your parents, and to you.
How to forget, how to love. Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you.
Stay well, all.
You
Thank you.
too. Bye.
Bye-bye.